Blake Mycoskie. Blake es el fundador y presidente de TOMS. Es una historia realmente muy inspiradora, es un caso de negocios interesantísimo, es una gente que transmite, que nos inspira, que nos comparte su visión y la misión que tiene, tanto él como la empresa. Y bueno, sin más preámbulo, porque ya íbamos esperando un poquito de tiempo, corre video y Blake viene con nosotros. Gracias.
Thank you. So 9 years ago, I was doing something completely different with my life. I was running an online driver's education company. Now that might sound like an oxymoron, but I had convinced the state of California that we could teach teenagers to drive online as well as in the classroom. Now the good news was that got approved. The bad news was there were many other entrepreneurs competing with me and my partners to launch their software program before ours. And so in a typical entrepreneurial startup, we were working 70, 80 hours a week, sleeping at the office, working Saturdays and Sundays. And at the end of launching our program, I was completely exhausted. I was so tired, I really needed to take a break. So I decided to take 1 month off from work and go down to Argentina for a vacation. Now there's a little bit of a backstory of why I chose Argentina, and that is because a few years earlier, my sister and I were on this reality TV show called The Amazing Race. How many people have seen The Amazing Race? Raise your hand. Okay, so quite a few people. So as you know, it's a race around the world. There's $1 million prize for the winners. And my sister and I, after racing for 31 days on national television, we lost the $1 million by 4 minutes. And the worst part is it was my fault. And for all the men in the room, I completely epitomized the cliche that guys will never stop and ask for directions. There was this moment that they showed on TV over and over again of my sister saying, "Blake, we're about to win $1 million. Don't you think we should just stop and get a map?" And I said, "No, I know exactly where I'm going." And 10 minutes later, we were lost, and 30 minutes later, we were losing the $1 million. The funny thing actually was about a month after the show was over, I got this text message from my sister, and it was like this random string of numbers. And I looked at the phone, and I thought, that's weird. And so I was about to call her, but I decided maybe she had pocket dialed me from her phone. And then a month later, I got another text from my sister, and it was another random string of numbers. And so this time I called my sister Paige, and I said, "Paige, why are you texting me these random numbers?" And she said, "Blake, those numbers are not random. That is interest you owe me on my $500,000. And she's been keeping track of it ever since. So I divert a little bit to talk about why I went to Argentina on my vacation. And the reason I went was because we had been there on The Amazing Race. But on that show, you don't get to experience the cultures because you're hurrying so fast through the countries. So on my vacation, I wanted to go somewhere where I could really reconnect with the culture and have an experience that I didn't have on The Amazing Race. So I bought a guidebook, and when I got to Buenos Aires, I started flipping through the things that Argentina and Buenos Aires are known for. First thing that came up was the tango. Well, I'm not a very good dancer, and I didn't think that's how I wanted to spend my vacation trying to improve, so I skipped to the next page, which was polo. Now, I grew up in Texas and riding horses, and I thought this is something I would enjoy, so I took some polo lessons, and after falling off the horse a few times and almost going to the hospital, I decided that was not how I wanted to spend my vacation either. But the third thing in the book that I found that I was very good at, and it would be a nice way to spend my vacation, is this red wine called the Malbec. And so I decided to spend my time traveling around to these different cafes and wineries, tasting all these wonderful wines. So in one of these cafes, I met a few women that were also in Argentina on vacation, but they were doing something very different with their time. This was their day off, but every other day of the week, they were working as volunteers for a nonprofit. And specifically what they were doing was something called a shoe drive. And what that meant was they were going around collecting slightly used shoes from wealthy families in Buenos Aires, taking them a couple hours outside the city to a village where many children didn't have shoes. They explained to me that one of the reasons they were really focused on this was the children who didn't have shoes were not allowed to go to school. Now, I thought this was crazy when I first heard about it, but they explained to me that in the school near this village, the children were required to wear a uniform, and part of that uniform were the shoes, and the shoes were the most expensive part. So if these children didn't have shoes, they would not be going to school. I grew up in a middle-class family in Texas, did not have to worry about shoes or clothes or food or these necessities. So I found it pretty amazing that there were people who did not have shoes and were not being able to go to school because of it. And I'm a very curious person. I ask lots of questions. And so as I was asking these questions into the cafe with these women, one of them said, "Hey, we're going to distribute the shoes in a few days. Would you like to come with us?" And I had never done anything like that in my life at this point, so I said, "Sure." And so next thing I know, I'm with a group of strangers in a truck with a U-Haul storage behind us with all these shoes that had been donated, going to this village, Los Pilitones. And when we get there, the kids and their families are waiting. They've been told that we're coming, and they are so excited. And as we started taking out the shoes and started putting them on their feet, there were tears of joy, there were hugs. It was just this amazing celebration. You would have thought that it was Christmas Day. These kids were cherishing these shoes. And these shoes were not even new shoes. These were hand-downs from families that had donated them. And so I had this amazing experience that day, and I left that village on a complete high. I was so joyful. It was the best day of my trip. And that evening, I was excited to tell Alejo, my polo teacher, at dinner about my experience. So that night, I started sharing with Alejo about the kids and the shoes we gave and how wonderful it was and how inspiring and exciting. And Alejo listened very intently. And then Alejo asked me a question that I wasn't prepared for. He said, "Blake, it sounds like you had an amazing day today, and I'm so thankful that you would take time out of your vacation to do this for the children of my country, Argentina. But these kids, if this is their only pair of shoes, they're going to need another pair in probably 4 or 5 months because kids' feet grow fast, and if it's their only pair, they're going to wear out of them. So how is this charity going to give them their next pair?" And I paused because I didn't have the answer. I was so caught up in the joy of the moment that I didn't take time to really think about how the kids would get the next pair. And I knew that the shoes had been donated, but I thought, well, if they don't get another donation in the next 6 months, especially the right sizes, these children would now go back to not having shoes. And so maybe we did not do anything good after all. Maybe we further exasperated a problem. And so all this joy and excitement I was feeling towards the end of dinner had come down a little bit because I was concerned about the sustainability of this project. So that night I went to bed and had a little bit of trouble falling asleep because I had all these thoughts in my mind about the kids that I met and how would they get another pair of shoes more regularly. And so I woke up the next morning and I was having my coffee and writing in my journal, and that's kind of a morning ritual for me. And I was thinking about how I could help. And some of the initial ideas were the things that most people would think about, like maybe I could ask my friends to donate shoes, maybe I could get donations in money and I could buy shoes. But very quickly I realized that I had no experience in charity or philanthropy, and I never liked the idea of asking someone for money. But what I did have a lot of experience in was starting businesses. I started my first company when I was 19. At this point, I was 29. So for 10 years, I've been starting small businesses to address needs that I saw in the market. So why not use business to address a charitable need? You know, I'd used it to address commercial needs, but what if I used business and entrepreneurship to address a charitable need? And so I started writing down this idea that it could be cool if there was a shoe company where it allowed customers to buy something that they wanted to help someone who had a need. And it would be one for one. And as I was writing this idea down, Alejo came back to tell me it was time for breakfast. And I remember very distinctly me very excited saying to Alejo, first, I have an answer to your question. And I explained to him my idea of this shoe company that would sell a pair and give a pair. And he got so excited about this idea that by lunchtime, he had convinced me that I could do it and that he would help me find some places in Argentina to make the traditional alpargata shoe, but in a different version to sell in Los Angeles where I lived. So I called my partners in the software company and told them, guys, I know my vacation was supposed to be a month, but it's going to be a little bit longer. But I have a good reason why, and I explained to them my idea. And they heard the passion in my voice, and they said, okay, take another couple weeks. We got everything under control. So Alejo and I went around to very few artisanal shoemakers who were making the traditional alpargata. We convinced them to change the design a little bit to make it more durable and what we thought would be more fashionable. And we started making these shoes as tests, as samples. We made about 250 pairs. We put them into 3 duffel bags, and off I went back to Los Angeles. Now I get back to LA, and I have kind of 2 problems. The first is I have to get back to work. I've been gone now for 6 weeks. The software company that I started with my partners was doing great, and they needed me to be focused on that. The second thing is I recognized very quickly that I knew nothing about shoes. I mean, I was able to make these samples in Argentina, but I didn't know what to charge for them. I didn't know where to sell them. I didn't know, who the target demo would be. Any of the questions that most people would at least have an idea of before they would get into this business. But what I did know is that every woman in my life, whether it was my mom, my sister, or my girlfriend, they spent so much time and money talking about shoes. And so I decided to have a dinner party where I would invite my sister and her friends over, and I would show them the shoes and get their thoughts. Now, when they got to my apartment that night, instead of having dinner on the table, I had all these bright colored shoes. And they thought that was a little weird. And I said, look, I'm thinking of selling these shoes that I found in Argentina, and I would love to get your opinion. Now, I very specifically did not tell them about one for one. I did not tell them about the kids in the village. I just showed them the product, because I knew that the only way this would work was if people really liked the shoes. They couldn't just like the charity. They had to like the shoes first. And so as I watched these girls try on the shoes in my living room of my apartment, I heard some good feedback. They were saying that they were cute. They were talking about what outfits they would wear with them. They were talking about other shoes that they were reminded of. And so I saw this good, positive feedback coming, and that's when I decided to take the pictures out of the children in the village that I visited. And I showed my sister and her friends these pictures, and I explained to them about the kids not having shoes and needing them to go to school, and that when they bought a pair of these shoes, we would give a pair. At that moment, I've never seen girls so excited to buy a pair of shoes. I mean, literally every single one of them bought at least 2 pairs. And not only that, they told me what they thought I should charge, what stores I should potentially go to, and even some PR contacts that they had that would help me get the word out. So I left very excited that evening. I went back to work, my typical day, and on the weekends I visited some of these stores, and eventually I got TOMS into a very cool store in Los Angeles called American Rag. The shoe buyer there was a woman named Courtney, and when I told her my story and she tried on the shoes, she just instantly got it. And she said, but I love the shoes, they're different than what we have, but the most important part is the story. And I need a way to tell the story. So I gave her this picture of me and one of the kids, and she put this picture in the front window of the store and then spread out all the bright color shoes around it. And on a piece of cardboard, we wrote, with every pair purchased, TOMS will give a new pair of shoes to a child in need, 1 for 1. It was very exciting for me because she bought 80-something pairs for her store, and that was about a third of the 250 pairs that we had made. So already I'd sold a third of my inventory, and I was also selling a few pairs on our website that we created as well. So things were going quite well. I went back to work, and about a week later I get a call from a woman named Booth Moore. Now it turns out that Booth Moore is the leading fashion writer for the LA Times. And she had been in this store a few days after the display went up, and she had never heard of a fashion company or a shoe company giving something away every time they sold it. And she was very interested. And so I told her the whole story about Alejo and Argentina and what we were doing and why we were doing it. And she said, this is fantastic. I'm going to write about this in my column. Please send me a picture of your favorite pair of TOMS. So I emailed her a picture and didn't really know what to expect. But the following weekend, on the cover of the LA Times calendar section, which is the most widely read section of the paper in LA, there are 2 headlines. The first headline at the top of the page says, Da Vinci Code opens with 300 million in box office sales. You know, people in LA care about these things. And the second headline was TOMS shoes. Now get this, we sold 2,200 pairs of TOMS on our website by 2 o'clock that afternoon. But I only had 140 pairs in my apartment. So I like to say this was the first of many supply chain problems to come. 2,200 pairs. And the funny thing was, I had set our website to send me an email every time we got an order. Now this was really cool at first because like I was getting 2 to 3 orders a day. So it was like my mom ordered a pair, my college roommate ordered a pair. Like it was very nice to get these emails. It was like affirming that I was doing something good. But when 2,200 orders came in, I'll never forget it. I woke up that morning and I turned on my BlackBerry and it started vibrating like uncontrollably because all these emails were coming in. And I don't know if you ever had a BlackBerry, but if too many emails came in, it would like lock up. And so I put it on the table and then it just started spinning around on the table like it was possessed. And after 20 minutes of vibrating, the battery died. And so I didn't know what was happening. And I'll never forget, I went to this cafe to meet some buddies for breakfast, and one of them just jumped out of the booth, and he said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. Can you believe it?" And I'm like, I mean, we eat here almost every Sunday. I don't think it's that great. And he's like, come on, you had to have seen the paper. And I hadn't seen the paper at the time. And so he showed it me this amazing article on the cover. And immediately I understood what was happening with my BlackBerry. So I literally ran home and I started doing what I think many entrepreneurs do in a time of need. And that is I posted as many ads for interns on Craigslist as possible. And that worked. I actually got several interns that would give up their summer, work for free, and help me send emails and call these 2,200 people that thought they would be getting their shoes in the next 4 days, like the website promised. it was going to be more like 8 or 9 weeks. And so I left the interns in the apartment, and I headed back to Argentina with a duffel bag of a few clothes, toiletries, and most importantly, that LA Times article. So I land in the Buenos Aires airport, and I immediately take a taxi to this guy Juan's house where we're making the shoes in his garage. And I go to it and I pull out the paper and I say 3 words. I say, muchos zapatos rapido. And that was the extent of my Spanish then, and maybe the extent now. So they couldn't believe it. So he starts calling his buddies. The next thing we know, we have several artisanal shoemakers coming together to see if we can kind of create a production line there in Argentina. And we got pretty good. We got to where we could make about 900 pairs a week. And so after a few weeks, I was able to come back to Los Angeles, ship all these shoes, and then satisfy all these patient customers who had ordered on the website. Now, when I got back, it was July 2006. And in July 2006, a movie came out called The Devil Wears Prada. How many people saw that movie? Raise your hand. Okay, great. Most people. So when I got back in town, I went and saw that movie with my girlfriend at the time, and you know, and I was kind of amazed at the whole thing, and so it was amazing because I think like a week or 2 later, I got a call from Anna Wintour's office at Vogue magazine. Now, I had just seen what this woman's character had done to Anne Hathaway, and I couldn't imagine what she would do to a guy from Texas who knew nothing about fashion. But I knew enough after seeing that movie that if she calls, you get on a plane. And I did, and then this came out. Now, I think there's something really interesting about this article, and I think it's worth noting. Vogue does something really amazing here. They make it look like I know exactly what I'm doing. I mean, this does not look like a guy who's selling shoes out of his apartment and making them in people's garages in Argentina with no employees at the way, just interns. So what happened is after this article came out, it's Vogue, right? So everyone's reading this, and people are thinking that we're like a real business. So we're getting calls now from like Bloomingdale's and Barney's and Urban Outfitters, and then we started getting calls from stores in London and stores in Paris, and not Paris, Texas, Paris, France. And so I mean it was crazy. Actually, I'll never forget, about 2 weeks after the article came out, we got another phone call in my apartment. Now, let me set the stage a little bit. In my apartment, I had 2 roommates who had jobs that they went to every day, and then the interns would come and we would run the business out of the apartment. And we had a cordless phone that was for the business line that we got installed. Now, I don't know if you remember when a lot of us had cordless phones, but if the phone was off the charger for any amount of time, it would start beeping, right? Well, we had the worst cordless phone ever, and if it was off the charger for more than 2 minutes, it would start beeping, which was really annoying if you're on the phone, right? And so we had a rule that the phone always stayed on the charger, and whoever was closest to it would answer the phone. So we didn't have like one intern be the receptionist. Anyone who was close to that phone would answer at TOMS Shoes. So about 2 weeks after this article comes out, phone rings, and I'm closest to the phone, so I answer it, and I say, "Hi, this is Blake, TOMS Shoes." Now there's this guy on the other line, and he is, you can tell he's a little bit anxious, and he's speaking very fast. And he says something like, "Hi, yes, I need to order 100 pairs of women's TOMS. I need red, I need navy, and I need natural color, and I need them today." Now, this was this wasn't normal for us. We weren't getting people calling, ordering 100 pairs, you know. And so I said, well, this is fantastic. Sir, you know, who are you and where are you calling from? And he says, oh, yes, I'm sorry. I'm really stressed right now because my boss is frustrated with me. You know, I'm the assistant buyer of women's shoes at Nordstrom at the corporate office in Seattle. And my boss really wants these shoes on the floor, like tomorrow. Everyone's asking about him after this article. And so I'm like, okay, well, wow. Like, I mean, I don't know a lot about shoes at this point, but I know that, like, Nordstrom is like the holy grail of shoes in the United States. And they don't typically just call you in your apartment. Like, people work really hard to get a meeting there. And so I'm excited, but at the same time, I'm immediately reminded of the fact that because of this article, just like the LA Times, we have now sold out of all of our shoes. So there's no shoes in the apartment to send this guy who wants them so badly. So I tell him in a very nice voice, I say, sir, I'm so glad you're calling, but the truth is I can't send you any shoes today. Probably can't even send them for a week or two because, you know, we're all sold out. And he says to me, I don't think you understand. This is Nordstrom. Like, bump someone else's order. I need these shoes. And I'm like, okay, sir, with all due respect, I don't think you understand. Like, it's not about bumping an order. Like, I don't have any shoes to send you. So at this point, the guy gets pissed off at me. And he says, listen, buddy, if you can't help me, put me in touch with the sales department. So here I am, holding the cordless phone. It's going to start beeping any second. And I look over, and my 3 interns are sitting there eating breakfast tacos, laughing. And one of them, this girl, Lena, kind of like, give me the phone, give me the phone. So I'm like, fine, whatever. So I toss her the phone. She catches it, and without pausing, she says, hi, this is Lena in sales. So I don't know if she had a better voice or whatever, but she talked the guy down, calmed him down, and convinced him that we really weren't like a big company. We were working out of an apartment, and the guy he was talking to was actually the guy in the article, and then all these things. And he agreed to take the shoes in like 4 or 5 weeks when we would have them. And to this day, Nordstrom is one of our best customers. So it was really a funny, funny moment. But that summer, we sold, because of this article and several others, we sold 10,000 pairs out of my apartment. 10,000. Now, you got to remember, my goal was to sell 250 pairs before Christmas and go back and give every single child a pair from that original village. So now I had to figure out how to give away 10,000 pairs. So I did what I think most people do when they get themselves in a bind, is I called my parents. And I said, Mom and Dad, I need your help. We need to go to Argentina. We got to distribute 10,000 pairs of shoes. My parents at that point had never left the country before, so they said, we're in. Then I called my brother, and I called my sister. I called some friends. I got one of our original interns, and we all went down to Argentina. And we met Alejo and his family and friends, and this group of 16 Americans and 20 Argentines got on these buses, and we traveled through northern Argentina, where there's really intense poverty on the border of Brazil, and we distributed these shoes. We distributed them in schools. We distributed them at clinics, many places that the nonprofit had wanted to work in the past. I'll never forget the first experience. We were in this kind of like this room that was kind of a cafeteria-like. It was dark. It was raining outside, and we were giving the kids the shoes. Now, many of these kids don't wear shoes, or if they had a pair, it was a pair of flip-flops. So they didn't even know their size. So it was quite chaotic trying to figure out what size they were. And the kids are running around, and we're distributing the shoes. And I pause for a second and look up, and I see my mom, and she's in the far corner of the building. And she's sitting there very peacefully. And there's probably 5 or 6 boys sitting around her, and they're very peacefully waiting for their shoes. And I see what she's doing. She's taking these wet wipes out of her purse, and she was cleaning their feet. And so these feet, I mean, just to give you perspective, many of them had blisters, infections, they smelled, they were not clean or pretty feet. But my mom was treating them as if they were mine or my brothers or my sisters. And when I saw my mom doing that, I just got very emotional. I was so touched by the care she was giving each of these children before giving them their new pair of shoes. And it wasn't just because it was my mom. I think it was this realization that just 5 months earlier, this was an idea. This was a simple idea that I was writing in my journal that, just like many other ideas, I could have just put in the journal and never done anything about. I could have gone on with my job, with my life, as most of us do, and say, that's a nice idea, but it's not for me, or I could never do it, or all the excuses that get into our brain when we sometimes come with ideas. But because Alejo's enthusiasm, and because I gave it a shot, we now were helping these kids in such an intimate and beautiful way. My mom was having this once-in-a-lifetime experience helping these kids. And that's why I think I was so overcome with emotion, because I realized the power a simple idea was having not only on the kids' lives we were helping, but on my family and my friends who were joining me. And I had similar experiences for the next 2 weeks as we traveled around on the buses. And I remember just experience after experience of children and families so excited and playing with the kids, and it was amazing. But it was an experience that I had on the second or third to last day, I can't quite remember, but very end of the trip, that really changed everything for me. I was leaving a clinic. I was carrying a box of extra shoes. We were getting ready to get on the bus to go to the next school. And this woman came running around the corner, and she was shouting out to me in Spanish, and she was crying. And as she was shouting out to me in Spanish, there were 3 boys running behind her, and they were all wearing new red TOMS shoes. And so as I was trying to get on the bus, she was trying to get my attention, and I couldn't understand what she was saying. So I got Alejo, and I said, Alejo, will you please ask this woman what's wrong? We're running late. We've got to go to the next school, and she seems to be disturbed. And so Alejo asked her in Spanish what was wrong. And when she replied, she stopped crying, and she was smiling, and she had all this enthusiasm. But as I looked at Alejo, I saw a tear coming down his cheek. And at that moment, I knew that what she was saying was not that she was sad, but she was incredibly grateful and happy, even before he translated for me. But I wasn't prepared what she was going to say. And when he told me, I was almost in disbelief. What he told me was that these 3 boys were her kids, and that for the past year, they had been sharing a single pair of shoes. And what that meant was they had, and they actually showed us the shoe, a pair of black men's Oxford dress shoes that didn't fit any of the kids properly and gave them blisters right above their ankles because of the rubbing as they wore them. But what that meant is that because they only had 1 pair, and it was required to go to school, that on Monday, her oldest son would wear that pair of shoes, walking well over an hour to get to school. And his 2 younger brothers would stay home. And then he would come home Monday night, give the shoes, the cherished pair of shoes, to his middle brother. And then he would stay home for the next 2 days until it was his turn to get the shoes and go back to school. So these 3 kids and this mom, who knew absolutely that education was the key to them having a better life, were only going to school every 3rd day just because of their shoes. But because of the shoes that we'd give them now, she was so excited that her kids would go to school every single day, and they would go together. And she was so thankful. And at that moment, all the things I had heard about kids needing shoes to go to school and this and that became very, very real. I mean, think about it. For everyone in the audience here that has kids of their own, or a brother or sister, imagine what it would be like to desperately, desperately want to go to school, to see education as your big opportunity to have a better life, but to not be able to do so because of a simple thing like a pair of shoes. And so when I had that experience with that woman, I got back in the van, and this time I started writing in my journal, but not about, an idea, but more about a commitment. Because I want to commit to spending my life and everything I could do and all the entrepreneurial talent or skill that I'd been given to really make TOMS a real business. At this point, it was a project. It was an exciting one, but it wasn't a real business. We didn't have real people who knew all the ins and outs of building a shoe business. And so I committed during that time to go back, sell the interest I had in the driver's ed company, and kind of go all in with TOMS. And I did, and I was able to start hiring some people. We augmented the amazing interns we had with people who understood shoes. We hired someone from Nike. We hired someone from ASICS to help us make the shoes. And before we knew it, things really started to take off. So 10,000 pairs became 50,000 pairs, and beyond Argentina, we started giving shoes in South Africa. A few years later, we hit the 1 millionth shoe given. I mean, this was such a surreal moment for us because just a few years earlier, we were trying to only help one village, and now 1 million kids. And then a few years after that, 10 million shoes given. I mean, it was just like incredible. And when we realized as we got to this size of a business, and we're now selling all over the world, that in order for us to sustain this 10 million number given, we needed to create other types of shoes. Because the classic shoe that I'm wearing right now is great, but we knew that people would want to wear other TOMS as well. So we created boots for the winter, wedges for women, ballet flats, and brogues for guys, so that we could continue to sustain this giving. And by doing that, in the last couple years, our business has become about 50-50 of the classic versus the others, and we've now given over 38 million pairs of shoes away. So it's been amazing to see how it's scaled. But as we were growing this, and as we were getting more and more excited about helping children with shoes around the world, we also recognized there were a lot of needs, and the one-for-one model could be applied to a lot of things. So 2 years ago, we launched the eyewear of TOMS. And this concept was for every time we would sell a pair of sunglasses, we would help someone with their sight. We would do this for giving kids prescription glasses. We would do cataract surgeries. But we could have a major impact in someone's life just by selling a pair of $150 sunglasses. And then we launched optical frames this past year, giving people the opportunity who need to wear glasses, the ability to give glasses as well. And so we've been able to take the one-for-one model into other product categories as well. So everything has gone really great up until this point. Things are growing, and we're helping a lot of people. And then I started to recognize that we were starting to have some pretty harsh critics, specifically online. And the criticism was this. It was, TOMS, if you are focused on poverty alleviation, then why are you just focusing on aid? You know, because what people need in these countries more than anything is a job. And you make all these shoes in the world, but you're not making them in the countries that you're giving. So why not create jobs? Now, criticism is always tough, but it's possibly the hardest when you listen to it and you agree with them, but you have no idea how to do anything about it. At this point, most of our shoes were being made in Asia, and then still some in Argentina. And I didn't have any understanding on how we could make shoes in places like Kenya or India or Ethiopia. But I knew that the critics were right. And I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned in business so far, and especially where everything is so transparent online, is you have to address your critics. And so we did. We said, look, we were really honest. We said, we don't know how to do this, but we're going to try. We're going to start working on a plan. And so a couple of years ago, we started first in India and then in Kenya, and we partnered with people to do manufacturing there. And then, so we got two going. And then we realized that this could be something that we could do more of. And then last year, we opened a footwear manufacturing plant in Haiti. Many people in Haiti lost their jobs and their livelihood after the earthquake. And this was an opportunity to help Haiti rebuild. And after we launched the Haiti factory, and we've also done a few more now, we're at the point where 40% of our giving shoes are now made in the countries that we give them in. And that's something that is very exciting as well. So beyond that, as we thought about our business, we thought, okay, well, we're now creating jobs through our manufacturing in some areas, but what else can we do in these countries? And we recognized that in many of the countries where we gave, so places like Rwanda, Malawi, Guatemala, Honduras, great coffee comes there. So I went to Rwanda and met this coffee farmer to learn about the business. And what I learned is that if we traded directly with the coffee farmers, we could actually increase their income by up to 30%, because a lot of their income was being lost to the middlemen that were working with the trading. And so we thought this could be an amazing way that we're already in these countries giving shoes, that we could help these farmers. But the other thing that I saw when I was visiting these farmers, that how much water they were using to process the coffee. And this might not seem like that big of a deal, but the reason why it was so hard for me to see was I knew that just down the road, these kids did not have access to clean water. These are kids in Rwanda who are walking miles with jerry cans just to get clean water for cooking and drinking. Yet the coffee farmers had to use this water to process their beans. So as I thought about all these things together, I recognized something that many people were very surprised, and that is we had done shoes, we had done eyewear, but the third thing TOMS should do, it would be actually we should do coffee. And we could do it to help people with water. So we launched the TOMS Roasting Company last year with this idea that every time we sold a bag, we would invest in clean water systems. And it has been such a fun example of taking creative approaches to solving problems, charitable problems with business, which is what we started to do in the very first. So as we think about the future, who knows where we'll go? There's many different needs in the world, and we don't think we're the only company to solve them. We are very excited about other social entrepreneurs. And so before I wrap up, and because a lot of people here in the audience are students and business owners, I want to share one final thing. And the final thing is really the number one lesson that I've learned in the 9 years since starting TOMS. And this is the realization that giving feels really good. Everyone here who's ever donated their time or their money to helping someone in need knows how good it feels to give back. But what I've learned the last 9 years is that giving doesn't just feel good, it's actually really good for business. And it's really good for building your own personal brand. And there's nothing wrong with that. If more people incorporated giving into their lives or into their businesses, we could address more problems in the world and build successful businesses and successful careers. And the way that I learned this was really 3 distinct experiences, I guess. The first was I realized very early on that when you incorporate giving or a mission or purpose into your business, your customers become your greatest marketers. One of the most expensive and challenging things for a new business is to advertise, to get the word out, because it's expensive. It's hard to get people to know about what you're doing. So one of the best things for a new business is when the customers themselves take it upon themselves to tell everyone they know about what you're doing with your business. And this is what happened with TOMS. I'll never forget, about 5 months after we launched TOMS, I was in New York City. And I was trying to get more accounts. And I wasn't having a very good week in trying to get more accounts. And I was a little bit discouraged. And I was going to the airport on my way home. And I got to American Airlines check-in counter. And on this particular day, I was not wearing a pair of TOMS. I was wearing a pair of running shoes or something like that. And I was doing my check-in. And as I was doing the check-in, I looked over. And there was this woman in her earlier mid-30s wearing a red pair of TOMS. And I was very excited because I had never seen a stranger wearing our shoes at this point. I had seen many of my friends and interns and family members in Los Angeles, but never a stranger 5,000 miles away. So I wanted to take this opportunity to ask her about the shoes. So I said to her, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but noticing these red shoes you're wearing. I really love them. What are they?" And pretending to know nothing about the shoes, right? And so she looks at me and her eyes kind of widen and she says, "They're TOMS shoes." Now remember, I'm trying to play it cool, like I don't know what she's talking about. So I'm still doing the check-in. But she didn't like that. She wanted more of my attention. So she literally put her hand on my shoulder, complete stranger here at the airport, and she kind of nudged me and she goes, "No, you don't understand." She goes, "This is the most amazing company in the world. When I bought this pair of shoes, they gave a pair to a child in Argentina." And then she continued, "And there's this guy, he lives in Los Angeles. I think he lives on a boat." And she literally started telling me my life story, like word for word, with more passion than my mom tells it. And so I was amazed at the details that she knew. And so I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have to tell this lady who I am now. And so I say, "Excuse me, ma'am, actually, my name is Blake and I started TOMS." And she pauses. And it's like she's totally frozen, like a deer looking into headlights. And she goes, "Why did you cut your hair?" That was her one question. But I learned a lot from that question about business, believe it or not, because the reason she knew I cut my hair was because she had watched all the videos on YouTube of us giving away the shoes. She wasn't just a customer, she was a supporter. She was an evangelist for the brand. So much that she thought she was telling the TOMS story to a stranger at the airport. And as I gave her a hug and thanked her and I went to my flight, I was thinking, like, how powerful is that? I mean, if this woman is telling a stranger at the airport, surely she's told all of her friends. She's posted about it on Facebook. She's maybe given TOMS to people for birthday or Christmas presents. And I'm sure she's tweeting about this right now. And so how many kids are getting shoes because of one woman's actions? Not her purchases, but her actions in telling the story of TOMS. And that's when I recognized that we did not need to focus on big advertising campaigns, but instead talking about our giving, sharing our giving with our customers, taking people on trips. And if we did that, they would share the story. They would do the marketing for us. And I believe that's why I'm here today. That's why we've helped 38 million kids. That's why the future is so exciting for TOMS, is because people love telling the story. But I don't think it's just TOMS that this can work. I think if businesses incorporate giving and mission into the DNA of how they exist, the customer loyalty will grow and they will help tell the story, and that is good for business. The second thing I recognized very early on as we were trying to hire people to come help us is that when you have a purpose and a mission in your business, it's much easier to attract amazing employees. And not only attract them, but to retain them and to motivate them. And I've spoken to so many businesses around the world now about this very simple principle that people don't just want a paycheck, they want a purpose. And when you incorporate purpose into their work life, you're not only giving them a great gift, but you're also doing something that will have a huge return on investment for your business. And for young people in the audience, students here, as you think about jobs and the future of your career, having a background where you have some experience in charity or interning with a nonprofit or an organization helping in the local community is such a wonderful thing to see on someone's resume. The third and final part of this and this philosophy about giving being not only feeling good but good for business is about partnership. No business can be successful on its own, and no person can have a successful life or career just by their own efforts. It takes partners, it takes friends, it takes family, it takes people rooting for you, people wanting to see you be successful. And I truly believe TOM's success has come from all the people who've cheered us on from day one in the apartment, or all the wonderful people I met yesterday here in Mexico City cheering us on as we enter Mexico with Palacio. And the reason people root us on is because they see that we're doing this not just for the bottom line, but for helping people as well. And so if you become a person that is known for giving, for helping, for serving, people around you will cheer you on and want to see you be successful, whether you're a business or whether you're a student who's getting ready to start their career. So I guess the point in all that is, and I think the point of the whole last 9 years is quite simple. Giving feels great, and everyone should do it for that simple reason. But it also is really good for business, and it's really good for building your own personal brand. So my challenge to everyone is, how can we incorporate more giving into our lives? Thank you very much. There you go.